Hello, welcome to SHOWstudio. It's a new season of Head to Head. It's Spring-Summer 19. Today we're discussing New York Fashion Week, and I'm going to do that with the lovely Calum Knight. Hello, Calum.
Thank you for having me again.
How are you?
All very well. Excited to talk about New York.
Do you remember anything about New York? It's like 1,000 years ago.
It was a weird one, and also especially in September when everyone's been away. And I didn't go to New York this season, so it feels like something that's happening. Everyone's starting to prepare for London and getting all of this stuff together, and it does feel slightly othered from the three European, and it's kind of responded to in that way. It's, the New York designers are very close with the New York press, and it also feels slightly in-house. Also, the New York houses don't communicate so much with the European.
But also, I think the fact that it's just after the summer holiday or some inside the summer holiday makes it quite hard to communicate before because we don't really care. We're sitting on a beach with our rosé. And,
because fashion closes down in August completely.
Exactly. But anyway, it happened, and this year it saw the return home of Princess Schooler and Rodarte. Tom Ford opened it, I think even a day before, the night before the official opening. Marc Jacobs closed it. It still was a little bit, for better find of an adjective.
That schedule hasn't changed in a long time, really.
I know, but I also think that the creativity of New York hasn't changed in a long time. So, there were some interesting things. There are some newish designers helping it a little bit, but before even going into details, I think sometimes I wonder, maybe we forget about New York because there's nothing really exciting. No matter how good or bad a season is in the other cities, there's always something, especially in London and in Paris, exciting. Here, there's nothing that, I had to go back and watch everything to prepare for this, while I don't need to prepare as much for Paris.
Yeah.
Do you see what I mean?
No, totally. And I think New York, as I was saying, does speak to itself a lot. And people, it's because you have a brain drain of people wanting to come to Europe to show. So people show in New York because they get the space of a reasonably smaller schedule, better timings, and that's because there they live.
Schedule, they have
hundreds, but it's easier. It's easier to be at the top of your game in New York than it is to compete with the big houses in Paris.
Yes, for sure.
So people can grow and really speak. Also, New York has a lot of great things like the diversity, and which I know was a really big factor of this season.
It was the biggest percentage of diversity on the catwalk of the whole four cities, so that's the positive.
And it stays like that pretty much every season. It's pretty. New York seems to be best at that. So there are lots of benefits of being there. However, I think once you reach a point, designers naturally, most of them at least, want to start coming to Paris.
But then they go back because they get drowned into
the huge
big
houses.
They're huge, but also if they're not as huge, the most successful press-wise, and
Oh, just the budgets as well.
But do you think that New York suffers because it's, by definition, America is very commercial, or it's because they don't foster new talent?
I think they're starting to get better at fostering new talent. I also think that the education in America, because I actually studied at an American fashion school, is very different. I didn't complete my degree, but I was there for 2 years, and it's a very different thing. It doesn't hone a single craft, which is great for some people. Some people work very well with learning a bit of pattern cutting and a bit of drawing and a bit of design, and you can also go do a minor in carpentry. That works for some people, but you don't hone a single craft. You learn lots of different bits. So when you find American younger designers who have gone through the fashion school route, they're a bit all over the place. Whereas if you have children, young adults coming out of Central St. Martin's or Antwerp, they've really pushed one thing, and they come out with that strong voice that can knock
so they push
budgets out of the way, and because you've got that voice, and that's what you need. You either need a lot of spectacle or you need a big voice to really make your dent in the
I know also that, for instance, Antwerp is the one I know the best. They're pushing creativity to the edge, which is very good because then you can try and be commercial, but at least you learn how to explode and express your creativity. But I also think that, you know, like if you think about Michael Halpern, who is a New Yorker, he studied at San Martin, he decided to stay. So they have to be careful, because if they have a great talent who doesn't want to go back, then I don't know. Anyway, let's go into the brands. And let's maybe, we have to mention the big thing that started New York this season was also Ralph Lauren 50th
50 years.
birthday, anniversary. A la Ralph Lauren, they did a huge thing. They practically rented Central Park. It was a big spectacle with a lot of great hits, and looking back at what it was, I mean, the press talked about that. Ralph Lauren is a big advertiser. It's been a very important brand for American fashion. We can't deny that. Is it still relevant?
I think it's relevant to certain people. I don't think it's relevant in the fashion press anymore in that way. However, Polo Ralph Lauren, and is it Polo Sport as well?
Yeah, they have a lot of brands.
They have a lot of diffusions. That's becoming slightly more relevant in a young London kind of sportswear logo. Yeah, like I'm seeing it about. So it still is having its effect, but Polo Ralph Lauren, in terms of a high-end fashion brand where you would go to be dressed for a gala or something in America, that doesn't feel as relevant anymore.
No, and it was never there, because it was this American way of dressing up and down, meaning being comfy and anyway, so I don't think we should spend too much time in it, but we need to mention it. It's a big commercial brand. It's still probably one of the biggest brands in America, and they celebrated their 50th anniversary. But let's go into the other two big ones in New York, which are Calvin Klein and Coach. And before giving you the floor, especially on Calvin Klein, I know you're a fan of Ralph and Calvin. Exactly. I was a tiny bit underwhelmed by both, by the way. And I'm saying this because I have huge respect for Ralph and for Stuart, and I think both did a great job at the beginning of their American adventure. And now, sometimes I feel that the US is shrinking their creative brains.
Well, there's huge amounts of commerce behind, but that they have to fulfill.
Is that why?
I think so. Think of all of the different Calvin Klein brands. You have Calvin Klein jeans, established 19, whatever, you know, there's so many proliferations that Ralph is supposedly, and I believe that he is, looking after. So everything's going to suffer a bit. I see why people didn't love this Calvin collection as much. I didn't love it as much as the collection that I'm wearing today, that I thought was one of the best things I've ever seen and felt so right, you know, in the climate that we're in. This felt a little more detached, a little more quote unquote aimed at millennials, and we've all graduated. But actually, there were some really strong pieces in here. I think like
still Ralph Simmons.
Yeah, but that's got the skirts with the shot by out of them were so literal and quite funny, and I thought there is always that with these horror films like Jaws. When you look back on them, they're so literal that it's ridiculous.
Yeah. What was that about?
The Jaws referencing. I loved it. I kind of love this idea.
It was a tiny bit literal. And what about that skirt that doesn't look like a skirt and it's
the scubas?
Weird, yeah.
Yeah, I was looking at those more as in kind of, you know, lots of obviously going down and surfing in California. I was reading it more as kind of latex S&M wear with those weird, with the rubber harnesses.
Can we stop on that, please? Can you stop? Yeah, that one.
With the rubber harnesses and then all of that, I thought it was great. I thought it had this real S&M kind of Berlin meets California surfer. I mean, again, it's not, as a whole vision and proposition, it's not Ralph's best, but I like the ideas behind it. I also quite like the idea of a huge shark coming to eat Calvin Klein, and that, you know, you're saying about how commercial everything is.
Do you think that's the irony? That's what it means?
That's the commercial side of a brand coming to take away what Calvin Klein is and kill it and eat it. I mean, there's quite a literal reference of the big sharks. I
am a tiny bit worried here about what they're doing of Ralph, because it is, you know, and I thought about Nicolas when he went to Louis Vuitton, and you know, it's very different to design for a niche brand or. Well, actually, designed for Dior, and he did a pretty good job. But it's a different kind of animal.
But this is different. This is way more different.
It's way more different. And it's America, and it's New York, and it's, you know, I mean, but at the beginning, you know, his first show I thought was fantastic, and then he opened that store with the scaffolding that's very interesting, and then suddenly now, and also this Americana theme, been there, seen that? No.
I mean, what I was thinking on my way in actually is if you think how big America is, it's huge. It's not just New York and LA. So he could realistically do the next 50 collections and look at one state per season.
Yeah, but I don't want
No, I'm not saying he should.
Please.
But each, he's moved to America, he's learning about it, and that's what's going to be, and as he meets different people from different states, different sides of the American lifestyle, that realistically Calvin Klein fits into all of them in one way, whether it's the Western shoes or the underwear that every teenager gets on their 13th birthday. Like he's still learning about all of that as a total outsider. So I don't think we'll stop seeing the Americana for another few seasons because I think he's still learning about it.
And the same is happening at Coach.
Yes.
So let's move to Coach, which, it's a totally different story because Coach has been a big, important American brand for leather goods. So, the ready-to-wear is as new as Stuart Vevers is there. And again, the first Little Prairie collection was very interesting. The first work he did to bow to the American modern or non-modern style was respectful and interesting. And then the Selena Gomez thing, and now this Burning Man meets La Prairie thing, it's a little bit like done.
Yeah, I mean...
Help me out here. You went to their show last season.
I went to their show last season.
Right?
I didn't mind it. It didn't go far enough for me. And again, you're looking at a brand that's communicating not just to America, not just to the Europe, it's communicating to the world and trying to sell to the world. So they can't necessarily have much of a standpoint on anything. It has to be, these collections should kind of have to be of things that will not offend anyone and kind of odd little reference points that come up into a collection because they can't be political. Or people are worried, these big brands are worried to be political, worried to nail their colours to the mast because
That's interesting.
They'll end up offending.
Yeah, but you can also be
clients.
political without giving me another La Prairie dress.
True. No, and I mean, there are brands that do it, like, especially in Paris, but we'll talk about that another time. But, there were brands that managed to be political without alienating. But I think that's kind of the next frontier for big brands, is to work out how to have a voice that is tuned in and tuned on, that while still having a commerce side and not offending tons of people or alienating clients. With this, I mean, there's cool clothes. There's clothes that are cool. People will wear them, but that's where it stands. And
I went through the collection carefully, and there are many, many pieces that I think very good and very appealing and very interesting, and probably also very right. I still don't know exactly who the Coach ready-to-wear client is because it's so new.
But it's just it's accessories for the bags. The clothes are the accessories for the bags. I don't think they sell.
Well, but this collection looks like something that they want to sell because it's wearable.
I think it is very wearable. I just worry with these brands that are accessories brands going into ready-to-wear. Quite often, the numbers for the ready-to-wear don't work, so they don't create enough of them.
Yeah.
So then
they don't even produce.
So then you can't produce it. So then you can't get it. So then you continue having this problem. To really push an accessories brand into a ready-to-wear space, you have to have huge financial backing and be prepared to make thousands of dresses that might not sell.
i.e. Louis Vuitton with Marc Jacobs 15 years ago.
And that's not great for the environment. There's a lot of social problems with that. But that's the only way, is to really invest in it. And I don't know of Coach Art because I have not seen their ready-to-wear anywhere but the runway. I haven't seen it.
Oh no, I have seen it in stores.
Really?
I mean, if you go to the, I don't know the small stores, but if you go to the flagships in every continent, there is ready-to-wear even in the window, including in London.
I've seen it in the window, but I mean, what I more meant by that is I haven't seen it on the street style during Fashion Week. I haven't seen it on red carpets, apart from Selena Gomez. It's not, then they're not putting the budget behind the ready-to-wear. They're still just putting it on bags which sell, which makes sense, but then you're never going to grow a ready-to-wear business by not financially supporting it.
Well, the campaigns and Selena, there is some budget behind it. She even designed the collection. Here there are some sweaters with the Disney characters that was designed by Selena. So all of that costs money. And when you read their financial statements.
Are they investing more and more?
Perception is more important. So what you're saying matters because that's the perception. But they believe in Italy a bit more. And I do think that Stuart, I still think he's doing a good job. And that's why we're still talking about it. I'm very interested in coach, you know, and the path that they've had and what they're doing is very clever. This collection for me was a little bit, I don't know exactly where I want to go. I don't mind repetition. No. You know, I don't mind trying to establish a signature. I don't mind that. I do mind when I do not find out where they're trying to go. And that's a little bit, I felt that with Calvin Klein as well this season. But I thought, sorry, you want to say something about it?
I was going to say something about this, and it's something I've been thinking for the past few seasons, but it's definitely worth saying in New York. And as that kind of dreaded in between being a millennial and Gen Z, I'm the youngest in millennials, the youngest year to be a millennial and oldest year to be Gen Z, pretty much, that people showing millennials and using millennials in their campaign and all of this stuff, and there's this whole big buzzword around it, is actually the totally wrong thing to do. Because the last thing I want to do is be like people my age. The last thing that I want is if I see my friend wearing something, doing something, I'll respect it, I'll like it, but I won't go buy it.
So who would you want to see?
I think I don't know who it would be, otherwise I'd be going and telling all the brands if I knew who it was. But what you want is you want aspiration, you want to see what you will be, not what you are and what you already have been.
But you don't belong to that kind of people. But Selena Gomez has 75 million, 100 million, followers. So there are many people that she inspires and many people are aspiring to be like her. So she's the biggest social media person in the entire universe.
But I think also people are not necessarily following her for that. People like her and respect her, but I think people are following her for her music more than her fashion. So then when she comes into the fashion sphere to be an influencer and all of that, and for the ready-to-wear.
Do you think that many people follow her for music only? Come on.
I genuinely believe people, obviously she works. I do see what you mean and I do agree in a way, but just overall, and Selena, you can have influence, you can have all of that, but when a whole collection is so based around and featuring millennials on a catwalk to the campaigns, I mean, when you have huge stars like that, that's a different level, I guess. And I'm not so much speaking about that because you can have one big cover star who speaks to millions of people. Yeah. But when the whole thing is aimed and repeating this message of cool young dive bars and all this stuff that is deemed to be what 20-something-year-olds want by 40-something-year-olds, actually what you want
I hear you.
is to see something that you haven't seen before and that you want to be and you want to aspire to do. If you're going to spend £1,000 on a coat, it's not to look like you looked yesterday. You want to look like you've changed.
I hear you, but I've got news. The world doesn't reason like you, Calum. But it's not, I'm not trying to be selective here, but in a way I am, you know, it's when these people have, I mean, do you know what 100 million people means? I mean, there are few.
I can't even imagine that
but because there are even few countries that have so many people in the country. So that shows that it's a much more mass phenomenon. And one thing I think coach are doing right is I do think,
the mass.
Yeah, I think, you know, being in bed with that mass, that it's fashion oriented, that is aspiring to be Selena Gomez, because that's what they aim at. You know, they're not Balenciaga, which we will discuss in a different head-to-head. But I don't want to take too much time on this because otherwise it becomes a coach head-to-head. I would like, before going to Marc Jacobs, that this season more than ever needs some talking, I would like a few words about Telfar, because it's probably one of the things that inspired me the most this season in New York, and I'm not always a fan. I'm very much a fan of what he stands for and how he talks about that. I'm not always a fan of the collection. I think that this time he nailed both. Yeah. He nailed the narrative, he nailed the way he did it, including the rain that wasn't probably forecasted, and he also nailed the collection because there is fashion there and there is fashion that's really appealing.
I mean, so obviously, as I said, I wasn't in New York, but I actually made sure to go to to Telfar's showroom when I was in Paris because I really wanted to see this collection. I think he's a very important designer.
Yeah.
I think it's about time that he's having his recognition, and I know he spoke about that in his show notes, and he's very aware that he's having his moment. And I hope it's a long moment, but if it's not, he's aware of it and he's trying to get his messages through now, which is why you're seeing these super strong collections for him, because he knows for this few seasons, he has audience's attention, and that's a hard thing to have in fashion, and even harder to not take for granted and think you're always going to have it.
Completely agree.
He is nailing it. He is putting his colors to the mast politically, creatively, and it was super strong, super beautiful, super aspirational, in my opinion. But what I thought was really interesting is when you see these clothes up close, there's lots of things that can be either worn in two separate ways or cover a lot of things up and have very small but very sexy details.
But also his Americana comes from denim, which couldn't be more American, and then he did very interesting denim and very creative denim, and a different way to, as you say, you can wear it the way you want, but they gave us so many possibilities to be, because he dedicated the show to America, so he's American, and that's why he's not showing in London, which is a pity, because I think
we'd love to have him there.
He would be perfect here.
He did kind of. He did a little preview of his show at the Serpentine over summer.
Yeah, I know.
So he did a little thing. So he obviously
with the same choreographer.
Yeah.
But he's American. He's not good. He's
and he should stay there. New York needs him there because he has a voice of reason there. That I think, obviously he could do amazing things in London, but I actually love that he stays there because that's where he spent, he's been working on his brand for 10 plus years.
That's where
he's been growing it there. Why would, as soon as it gets good, would you run away?
But I think he's the next one who's going to be picked up by a big brand.
I hope so. I really hope so. But he is risky. He's not a worldwide, he's got a worldwide appeal, but his message is not worldwide.
No. He's risky, and I don't know him personally, but he might also say no.
Yeah, I
just want to read you something that I thought was very sweet that he put in his notes. So he talked to, it was quite interesting because he talked to himself as a young man. And so he said the things that he actually did and made him finally, after all these years, if not a great commercial success, at least someone noticed and noticeable. And he said, there was something written, and then he gave this list of things, and he said, design uniforms for 10,000 employees of White Castle, win CFDA fund, keep family clothes, ignore the bullshit. Good luck, lots of love. And I think that's very interesting, and that shows you how sincere he is in a way. Because he said, I'm just saying things that I've done and brought me where I'm here. It took me time, but here I am.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think, so I did a show talk about this collection because I thought it was really important. And one of the things that really struck me was this idea of passing as a minority, especially a sexual minority, was that lots of these clothes really came to life in the details where from the front, it was a zipped up polo shirt. Yeah. But on the back, it had scoop necks or, and it had all of this. So you could go out on the streets in America and be wearing quite subversive, very sexual and very coded outfits that put you in certain tribes or, relate you to different groups. But to the normal waspy American, they wouldn't notice. And there's this idea of passing that's been about for a long time, of making yourself not noticeable to the majority, but still dressing in a way. And this is very modern, but very sad that in this day and age, people still feel, in America especially, that people still feel the need to hide. But that is a section of a market that needs to be catered for, that don't feel necessarily safe in the way they dress. And he is catering.
We live in London, which is probably the most liberated.
That's because he's showing that. I mean, there's swathes. There's swathes of
Paris
the world.
Sometimes,
I mean, Paris is. I lived there, and it was.
There
were lots of times I didn't feel safe. No. But so there is a huge market for this of people who want to wear luxury and look, and to their friends they know exactly what they're wearing, but actually need to pass in the day and need to be able to get on with their lives.
It's obviously the opposite of what you were saying for Coach and Calvin Klein. They cannot afford to be political because they have, so that's couldn't be more political, from what he says, from the people he chooses to sing, from the location, everything. And of course, his fashion is like the uniform of a tribe. Yeah. And I like that, and I think New York needs that, and I hope we're going to see more of him
Yeah.
and see more of what he does on the streets. We've got a few minutes still, and I would like to close with Marc Jacobs, because recently I was not impressed.
Same.
I thought Marc was, I even thought he was giving up, you know,
Yeah.
it was like, and boom, he came back with a bang.
Real big bang.
He did a show that was, someone said, divine and horrifying, meaning that, you know, you can also not like
Yeah.
it for what it is, because it's, everything was over the top, larger than life, but it was so interesting, and it was such a statement that only Marc can do. And he closed Fashion Week like that, leaving us like, whoa, something happened here. What did you think?
I thought it was great. I love the story of the show being late. If I'd been there, it would have been the most stressful thing in the world, because Marc closes Fashion Week and has to be on time because all the London journalists
They
have to get back for London Fashion Week the next day.
Some had to leave because they
it
were
was an hour
missing
and a
their
half
flight.
late. But I, you know, that's super quote-unquote fashion-y, Devil Wears Prada kind of, and that's what Marc is looking at. He's looking at fashion with a capital F, from, you know, that huge, boisterous, slightly clowny, but actually incredibly made, and made for women. I think there is a big section of women, and realistically, if you're 21, you're not working in industry, and you see that, that is what you're going to think fashion is. That is going to captivate your mind. And if you have the money to buy it, you will.
Well, that's the problem, or the opportunity, because I think it's a very modern, albeit nostalgic return of glam.
Yeah.
Which, as you said, you know, for a young person like, oh,
who hasn't seen it in the
it's a little bit cinematic, it's a little bit costumey, but it's, however, if I were Mr. I don't know, owner of Marc Jacobs, and looking at this and say, oh, I've told Marc that he has now to make money, they're losing too much money, this is not going to save him.
No.
This is not the thing that is going to bring him back. So, but
you can do something, I mean, a bit like Valentino, or, you know, you can create these worlds, these ideas, and sell them via editorial, get them pulled in, get them on
and then
celebrities,
sell something else.
and then sell the print on a t-shirt, or sell, you know, and that's another way to work a fashion business.
It's a little bit, it's interesting because you mentioned Valentino, and again, we will talk about Valentino. I think there are ways to do it cleverly, and I'm not saying that Marc is very clever. He knows what he's doing. It's very difficult to turn a brand around when that's what you're showing. You know, they don't have Marc by Marc Jacobs anymore. They don't, you know, there's not many accessories here, which I love. It made me think of a very different style, but a Gautier who's like, this is who I am, I'm having fun, and this for me is fashion, which I respect.
Yeah, but so last night or 2 nights ago, Lady Gaga wore one of the suits to the Elle Awards. And actually,
here she is.
Taken out of that context, she doesn't look clowny. She looks like a strong woman who is doing it first. You know, it's that, you know, there's no, one of the things about this collection is it looked clowny and it was so dressed up. This doesn't. This is serious fashion for serious people who love to look elegant without wearing 1,000 Swarovski crystals or 20 million parrot feathers. You know, it's that, and that's what Gaga said, which attracted her about it so much, is she didn't want to dress up in diamonds.
That's probably one of my favorite red carpet looks of the past decade.
It's incredible.
Yeah.
So there's that serious side to it, and the way Marc presents the clothes, as you were saying, you know, is this kind of fanfare, ridiculous in a good way, kind of creative.
Yeah, divine and ridiculous at the same time,
But actually, when you take the clothes out of that context, they can look so elegant and really speak to people and really speak to me. And I thought that was a Phoebe Philo one-off. I didn't know what it was, but I was not thinking it was Marc. But as soon as I was told it was, it made total sense and made me go look at that collection again. And see,
that's a very good point. And yeah, I think, I really hope that they're going to turn the brand around, because Marc turned 55, is still young compared to the big, you know, ones that we will discuss in further head-to-heads, but we want him around for a while, especially for the sake of New York Fashion Week.
He keeps them there.
Great, so on these words, thank you so much for joining me, and please come back for the next head-to-head soon. Goodbye.
Bye.